Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitinamine Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashatade Shatarne Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Rama Rama Hare Hare. What's number? So we welcome everyone for today's morning reading and discussion. We are on the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita and verse number 19. Let me just open my book here.
Verse 18.
18, verse number 18. We need to read the purport of 18, correct?
Yes.
So, text number 18, once more. Jyotisam apita tamasaha paramuchyate yam jnanagamyam yadi sarvasya vishestitam. We can keep this aside. If need, we can take this out. Look, that's a matter. ठीक है. He is of light in all luminous objects. He is beyond the darkness of matter and is unmanifested. His knowledge, he is the object of knowledge and he is the goal of knowledge. He is situated in everyone's heart. So we had been discussing yesterday about it. So this is our super soul. Let's read the purport. A little long purport. We'll take a look quickly. Purport by His Divine Grace, Bhaktivinoda Swami Srila Prabhupada. The super soul, the Supreme Personality Godhead, is the source of light in all luminous objects like the sun, moon, stars. In the Vedic literature, we find that in the spiritual kingdom there is no need of sun or moon because the effulgence of the Supreme Lord is there. In the material world, that Brahma Jyoti, the Lord's spiritual effulgence, is covered by the Mahat Tattva. On the material elements, therefore, in this material world, we require the assistance of sun, moon, electricity, etc. for light. But in the spiritual world, there is no need of such things. It is clearly stated in the Vedic literature that because of his luminance, everything is illuminated. Therefore, this example is often given. The sun is there, but in the rainy season, when there is a dark cloud comes between our eyesight and the sun, then we cannot see the sun. So that dark cloud is Mahatattva, that is matter. So as long as we are covered over by matter, until then we cannot see the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's the point being made here. But beautiful example, makes it very easy. It is clear, therefore, that his situation is not in the material world. He is situated in the spiritual world, which is far, far away in the spiritual sky. That is also confirmed in the Vedic literature, Aditya. Varnam tamasaha parastat. He is just like the sun, eternally luminous, far beyond the darkness of this material world. His knowledge is transcendental. The Vedic literature confirms that Brahman is concentrated transcendental knowledge. To one who is anxious to be transferred to that spiritual world, knowledge is given by the Supreme Lord, who is situated in everyone's heart. One Vedic mantra, Shveta Shvutra Upanishad says, Tamha Devam Atma Buddhi Prakasham Mukshur Vai Sharanam Aham Prabhadya. One must surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead if he at all wants liberation. As far as the goal of ultimate knowledge is concerned, it is also confirmed in the Vedic literature. Tam eva viditvati mrityumeti. Only by knowing him can one surpass the boundary of birth and death. He is situated in everyone's heart as a supreme controller. The Supreme has legs and hands distributed everywhere, and this cannot be said of the individual soul. Therefore, that there are two nodes of the field of activity, individual soul and the super soul, must be admitted. And this is what we had been discussing yesterday. And Prabhupada is now drawing a conclusion. Therefore, two nodes of the field of activity, individual soul and the super soul, must be admitted. So, Anyways, we discussed this yesterday. This is the set of verses where people really get confused about it. They think this is being spoken about I. No, this is not about I. One's hands and legs are distributed locally, but Krishna's hands and legs are distributed everywhere. This is also confirmed in the Shvetashvara Upanishad, Sarvasya Prabhum Ishana Sarvasya Sharanam Brahat. That Supreme Personality Godhead Super Soul is the Prabhu or Master of all living entities. Therefore, he is the ultimate shelter of all living entities. So, there is no denying the fact that the Super Soul and the individual soul are always different. Hare Krishna. So, this concludes the discussion about your name. Who should be the object of knowledge? That is Super Soul. Who should we know about? Now, text number 19. Iti kshetram tatha jnanam neyam choktam samasatah madbhaktayeta vijnaya madbhava yoga upapadyate. Thus, the field of activity, body, knowledge, knowable, which means kshetra, jnanam, neyam, jnanam, neyam have been summarized, summarily described by me. Only my devotees can understand the thorough law and thus attain to my nature. Purport. The Lord has described in summary the book knowledge, described in summary knowledge and the knowable. This knowledge is of three things. What is the knowledge? The know, the process of knowing. So the verse 8 to 12 talked about process of knowledge. Those are the items of knowledge. What we need to humility, taking shelter of a spiritual master, etc. Combined, these are called Vijnana or the science of knowledge. Perfect knowledge can be under the devotees of the Lord directly. Others are unable to understand. The monists say that at the items become one, but the devotees do not accept this. Knowledge and development of knowledge mean understanding oneself in Krishna consciousness. We are being led by material consciousness, but as soon as we transfer all consciousness to Krishna's activities and realize that Krishna is everything, then we attain real knowledge. In other words, knowledge is nothing but the preliminary stage of understanding devotional service perfectly. In the 15th chapter, this will be very clearly explained. Now, to summarize, one may understand that verse 6 and 7 from Mahabhutani and continuing through Chetna Dhritihi analyze the material elements in certain manifestations of the symptom life. These combine to form the body or the field of activities. And Prabhupada is giving the summary of previous section, So that was about Kshetra. Verse 8 to 12 from Amanitvam through Tattva Jnanartha Darshanam describes the process of knowledge for understanding both types of knower of the field of activities, namely the soul and super soul. That is Jnanam. Then verses 13 to 18 yesterday, beginning from Anadi Mat Param and continuing through Hridi Sarvasya Vishtitam describe the soul and the Supreme Lord or the super soul, which is Gnayam. Thus, three items have been described. The field of activity, Kshetragya, the process of understanding, Jnanam, and the body, and both the soul and super soul, Gnayam. It is specially described here that only the unallied devotees of the Lord can understand these three items clearly. Mental speculators just cannot. They will be confused. So for these devotees, Bhagavad Gita is fully useful. It is they who can obtain the Supreme Goal, the nature of the Supreme Lord Krishna. In other words, only devotees and not others can understand Bhagavad Gita and derive the desired result. Hare Krishna. So Lord Shri Krishna in a handful of verses have summarized the most difficult and debatable part of Vedic literature. We have whole Sharika Bhashya by Shankaracharya debating on monism and oneness. And then we have Ramanujacharya's writing, Madhvacharya's writing, called Tattvavadis, Mayavadis on this same concept. We and the Lord are different. And Krishna has put it here. That's okay. We would not have understood by Srila because without Srila Prabhupada's simple commentary. And Prabhupada made it really easy, which makes sense for us. All right, now let's come to the next section of discussion. Purusha and Prakriti. So 4 questions have been answered. Kshetra, Kshetragya, Jnanam, Gnayam. All right, now the last 2 questions, Purusha and Prakriti, will be answered. Now, Purusha and Prakriti. So, 2 things about it. when Purusha is mentioned, when let's say yesterday night we were reading Srimad Bhagavatam, and there is a verse comes where Vidurji is speaking to Dhritarashtra. And while speaking there, he says something interesting, just to make you a little familiar with how to catch Sanskrit. And he says, this is third canto, chapter number 1, verse number 13. Sa esha dosha parishadvid aste grahan pravishtoyam apatyamatya. All right, I'll not go to my Sanskrit, but Sa esha dosha, he Vidurji is pointing towards Duryodhan. ये जो व्यक्ति है दोषों से भरा हुआ है. क्यों? पुरुषा द्विध आस्ते. द्विध मतलब द्वेष. ये पुरुषा से द्वेष कर बैठा है. अब ये जो पुरुषा है, कौन सा पुरुषा है? किससे द्वेष कर बैठा है? युधिष्ठिर महाराज? युधिष्ठिर महाराज? नो, पुरुषा इज पुरुषा, लॉर्ड श्री कृष्ण. पुरुषा द्विदास्ते. तो यहाँ पर बात जब की गई है, विदुर जी बोल रहे हैं, सो पुरुषा इज यूज्ड इन रेफरेंस टू कृष्णा और विष्णु ओनली. Everything else is prakriti. Now, there is two things. There is a discussion in relationship of matter. When Jivatma and matter, these two subject matter are discussed briefly, then sometimes you'll find we are also addressed as Purusha. To make a difference between two prakritis, depending on the context of discussion, who is speaking, what is he speaking, making point. Otherwise, in Vedic literature, whenever you read and you see in the verse, of course, for this you have to a little bit read carefully and pay attention to the Sanskrit, but I just want you to draw your attention there. So when you see what Purusha, it means Vishnu Tattva. Why Purusha? See, Purusha is the source of all energy. Aham sarvasya prabhu. What is it? Mata paratramnani, etc., etc. He is the source of all energy. So energy is Prakriti, and the source of energy or energetic is Purusha. This is how Vedic literature talks about it. And now this Purusha has multifarious energies. Internal energy, external energy, marginal energy. Who is a Purusha? Now, fundamental difference between Purusha and Prakriti is meant to be enjoyed, and Purusha is the enjoyer. All right? Purusha is the enjoyer, Prakriti meant to be enjoyed. But when Prakriti considers or begins to think himself to be the enjoyer, then karshan has to happen, then friction has to happen. So this is what the subject matter is going to talk about now. You can call it a little Purusha in the context of Prakriti. We are trying to, what is that shloka? Mamai vamsu jiva loka jibhuta sanatana, right? Manashashrani indriyani Prakriti sthani karshati. Manashashrani indriyani Prakriti sthani karshati. So that shloka Krishna says, we grouped around 6 senses, 5 gross senses, and then the mind. Prakriti sthani, we are in constant friction with Prakriti. This is 15th chapter, verse number 7. Why? Because one Prakriti is trying to manipulate another Prakriti. And that would not happen. That would just not happen. And what happens? Krishna says, Prakriti sthani karshati. Karsha matlab friction. Friction. It will just not happen. So, like forces, negative does not attract. It is positive, negative, which means unlike forces. So, Purusha is separate, Prakriti is separate, and that is the point we discussed here. Somebody may now say, oh, why can't I be Purusha? The reason you cannot be Purusha because your senses are limited and the resources are limited. Even if you have unlimited resources, your senses are ultimately limited. You cannot enjoy it. Your enjoyment only comes in. Prakriti can only be happy when it is in proper relationship with Purusha. Therefore, right at the introduction of Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada gives an example. Purusha is like a husband and Prakriti is like a wife. I'll give you another thing. Cheto darpana marjanam bhavamahadavagni nirvapanam shreyo kerva chandrika avitaranam vidya vadhu jivanam. Vadhu is wife. So it is said, where there is bhakti, vadhu jivanam. The knowledge follows behind like a wife. So traditionally, now somebody in this world of feministic revolution today may say, acha, मैं तो आगे चलती हूँ, पति पीछे चलता है. This is wrong. Well, that is your problem. But traditionally, the culture is the husband would be the, you can say, the proprietor, controller. He would work, provide, and the mother will take care of the household affairs and things like that. In that context, these examples are given like that. So that is what the relationship, and this is the eternal relationship. We cannot change it. So Prakriti becomes situated in a proper situation when it aligns with Purusha. It's just like you can see, if we have to give an example, it's just like a household affair. When there is a proper alignment between husband and wife wife is, what do you say, cooperative with the husband, then the household affairs grow properly. The kids are raised in a proper environment. Otherwise, it becomes chaotic, and the situation of divorce happens. When situation of divorce happens, then prakriti, which means suffering, happens. I'm just giving an example in that context, just to help you a little bit relate to it. And that is what the discussion coming up now. Prakatam purusham chaiva vidhi anadi ubhavapi vikaram cha gunam chaiva vidhi prakriti sambhavan. Matter, nature, and the living entity should be understood to be beingness. Their transformation and the modes of matter are products of material nature. Prakatim, see, I said when there is a difference, when there is a conversation about Prakriti and Jivatma, then Jivatma addressed as Purusha. So we'll take a look at this one, all right? Prakriti is materially the living entity. Why? Because 7.5, Krishna says, Aparyam itastu aniyam. Prakriti Jiva Bhutam. Arjuna, no, there is one more superior energy of mind. So, to Prakriti, therefore they address as Purusham in relationship to Prakriti. Is that clear? Otherwise, it is always, Purusha is used only for the Supreme Lord, Vishnu Tattva. So, Prakritim Purusham cha eva vidhi anadi ubhavapi. Anadi matlab beginningless. For both of them. Vikaran, transformations, gunan, modes of material nature, vidhi prakriti sambhavam. This is all possible because of modes of material nature. All right, purport. Who would like to read the purports now? They can raise your hands. We can call on the name and devotees can read. Yes, Mother Yogi, go ahead.
Then with Pranam Prabhuji. Purport. By the knowledge given in this chapter, one can understand the body, the field of activities, and the knows of the body, both the individual soul and the super soul. The body is the field of activity and is composed of material nature. The individual soul that is embodied and enjoying the activities of the body is the Purusha, or the living entity. He is one knower, and the other is the super soul. Of course, it is to be understood that both the super soul and the individual entity are different manifestations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The living entity is in the category of his energy, and the super soul is in the category of his personal expansion. Both material nature and the living entity are eternal. That is to say that they existed before the creation. The material manifestation is from the energy of the Supreme Lord, and so also are the living entities. But the living entities are of superior energy. Both the living entities and material nature existed before this cosmos was manifested. Material nature was absorbed in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Mahavishnu, and when it was required, it was manifested by the agency of Mahatattva. Similarly, the living entities are also in him, and because they are conditioned, they are averse to serving the Supreme Lord. Thus, they are not allowed to enter into the spiritual sky. But with the coming forth of material nature, these living entities are again given a chance to act in the material world and prepare themselves to enter into the spiritual world. That is the mystery of this material creation. Actually, the living entity is originally the spiritual part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, but due to his rebellious nature, he is conditioned within material nature. It really does not matter how these living entities or superior entities of the Supreme Lord have come in contact with material nature. The Supreme Personality of Godhead knows, however, how and why this actually took place. In the scriptures, the Lord says that those attracted by this material nature are undergoing a hard struggle for existence. But we should know it with certainty from the descriptions of these few verses that all transformations and influences of material nature by the three modes are also production of material nature. All transformations and variety in respect to living entities are due to the body. As far as spirit is concerned, living entities are all the same. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. Because sometimes it becomes a point of debate. I'll read out again. It really does not matter how living entities or superior entities or superior energy or the Supreme Lord have come in. It does not matter how we fell down to this world. The Supreme Personality of Godhead knows, however, how and why this actually took place. Jiva fall from Vaikuntha, Goloka, Brahman, it really does not matter. Prabhupada sums this up, the whole debate which goes on this subject matter. All right. Now, I have highlighted this point. If anyone's going to ask me for this question, I'm going to say, please read what Prabhupada says. Otherwise, this goes on endless argument. Okay, text number 21. Karya karana kartvatve hetuhu prakritirachyate purusha sukha dukkhana bhokatve heturuchyate. Very interesting. We'll go with a little bit of Sanskrit here, otherwise, because there's a technical, we'll miss out things here. Karya, cause and effect. All right, kartatve, in the matter of creation. Hetu means karana, or the instrument. Prakriti uchate. So Prakriti is a cause and effect. What is happening in this world is all because of Prakriti. Purushaha sukha dukkhanam. Now Purusha, which Purusha is being discussed here? Again, living entities. In relation to Prakriti, then Purusha is mentioned. Otherwise, how do you address Jiva? It's a superior energy. When something is superior to others, so that becomes Purusha, like that. Purushaha sukha dukkhanam. So Purusha, the living entity, Sukha Dukkha, he undergoes Sukha and Dukkha. Bhoktratve hetu ruchyate. It's like that. Nature is said to be the cause, whereas the living entity is the cause of various sufferings and enjoyment in this world. So all material cause and effects because of nature, and all the suffering and enjoyment in this world are because of the living entity, which means because of their actions. Papa, Ravi Bodkapu, your hand is up. Go ahead. Yes.
The different manifestations of body and senses among the living entities are due to material nature. There are 84 lakhs different species of life, and these varieties are creations of the material nature. They arise from the different sensual pleasures of the living entity who thus desires to live in this body or that. When he is put into different bodies, he enjoys different kinds of happiness and distress. His material happiness and distress are due to his body and not to himself as he is. In his original state, there is no doubt of enjoyment. Therefore, that is his real state. Because of the desire to lord it over material nature, he is in the material world. In the spiritual world, there is no such thing. There is no such thing. The spiritual world is pure, but in the material world, everyone is struggling hard to acquire different kinds of pleasures for the body. It might be more clear to state that this body is the effect of the senses. The senses are instruments for gratifying desire. Now, the sum total, body and the instrument senses, are offered by material nature, and as will be clear in the next verse, the living entity is blessed or damned with circumstances according to his past desire and activity. According to one's desires and activities, material nature places one in various residential quarters. The being himself is the cause of his attaining such residential quarters and his attendant enjoyment or suffering. Once placed in some particular kind of body, he comes under the control of nature because the body, being matter, acts according to the laws of nature. At that time, the living entity has no power to change that law. Suppose an entity is put into the body of a dog. As soon as he is put into the body of a dog, he must act like a dog. He cannot act otherwise. And if the living entity is put into the body of a hog, then he is forced to eat and stool and act like a hog. Similarly, if the living entity is put into the body of a demigod, he must act according to his body. This is the law of nature. But in all circumstances, the super soul is with the individual soul. That is explained in the Vedas Mundak Upanishad 3.1.1 as follows: Do Suparna Sayuja Sakhaya The Supreme Lord is so kind upon the living entity that he always accompanies the individual soul and in all circumstances is present as the super soul or Paramatma.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
What a fantastic discussion here. You know, beautiful, beautiful point. I mean, this is a technical subject. Those who have intellectual inclination, they would love this 13th chapter particularly. So I have highlighted certain part here. According to one's desires, activities would happen. Places one in various residential quarters, 1 BHK, 2 BHK, और क्या है बॉम्बे का छाल, राइट, चौल, ओके, चौल, नॉट छाल, ठीक है. The being himself is the cause of his attaining such residential quarters. Prabhupada's books, body as residential quarters, right? Nice. Makes it so simple to understand. And his attendant enjoyment or suffering. All right. Once placed in some particular kind of body, he comes under the control of nature. Because the body being matter acts according to the laws of nature. Fantastic. We are not the control of the body. The body is not controlled by us. And this point has been discussed already in the 5th chapter, verse number 12, 13, and 14, where we talked about the living entity can only desire, and when the Paramatma sanctions, Paramatma instructs the material nature to fulfill that desire. And then Prakriti, the body is made up of Prakriti. This is 3 gunas, earth, water, fire. So this is all Prakriti. And then the body acts. Can you imagine how fast is the processing happening within here? I desire to speak, and super fast. This is faster than the supercomputer. The process is happening here, isn't it? Like that is happening here. I mean, in other words, if you see, let's consider CPU, or consider super soul to be the central processing unit. Should I say that, or RAM? I don't know. Maybe you should call CPU the RAM. So maybe CPU RAM. I don't know. I have to get back and look into what computer, how it functions. But so anyways. He is in some kind of particular kind of body. He comes under the control of nature because the body being matter acts according to the laws of nature. Which means we are not. The body is acting according to the laws of nature. Therefore, have you seen, nobody wants suffering. Now, for example, let's say, we are with my example here, but just let's say nature's call. Do you decide nature's call? Do you decide when you're going to sleep? You may decide when you're going to wake up, and for that we put a struggle. Hai na? So, tell me where you think body is acting according to you. So many things. Now, urges. Do you decide when to eat? Do you decide when I'm going to feel thirsty? How is it acting? That is a point Prabhupada mentioned, is all acting according to the laws of nature. If you've got a body, these are the standard needs. This would be there. This is a part of it. At that time, Prabhupada writes, the living entity has no power to change that law. We are bound by the laws of material nature. Can anyone need any more evidence of this? Now, suppose an entity is put into the body of a hog or a dog, he has to live according to those conditions. He cannot act otherwise. And if the living entity is put in the body of a hog, like that. Similarly, the living entity, this is the law of nature. Wow, I really love this point. All right. And now we get into some very interesting subject matter, which we shall continue for tomorrow. Now they're gonna come some very, very important subject matter. Let me just read this Sanskrit for you, and then we'll pause for today. Purushaha prakatisto hi bhunkte prakatijan gunan karanam gunasangasya sat asatyo nijanmasu. Purushaha means living. Purusha again. Purusha prakriti, living entity, and prakatisto hi. Prakatisthahi being situated in matter energy. Now, this is another thing that this Purusha cannot be supernal because it's never situated in Prakriti. Just to give you another alternative to look at it. I don't know why I just get confused so much about it. Bhunkate Prakriti Jan Gunan, and then Bhunkate, he enjoys. Now, the Lord never means he never comes into this world to enjoy the things of this world. He's Atmaram. So, Bhunkate, so this is very clear that it is not the Supreme Lord. It's Jivatma. Bhunkate, Prakriti enjoys what? Prakriti Jan Gunan. जो प्रकृति के द्वारा create करा गया है. He can enjoy only that. You cannot enjoy independently. You can only enjoy what Prakriti gives you. Prakriti Jan Gunan. कारणम गुण संगस्या, और अपने आप को वो कारण समझकर बैठता है. क्यों? गुण संगस्या, क्योंकि when he comes in contact with the modes of material nature, assamis of the living entity, karanam, he considers himself the cause. That's the point. And then guna sangasya, because of his contact with the modes of material nature, which is because the moment you get a body, you are under the modes of material nature. What happened? Sad asad yoni janmashu. You get different kinds of species life. Some said to be good, some said to be bad. Janmashu, birth after birth. The living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. This is due to his association with that material nature. Thus, he mixes good and evil among various species. Hare Krishna. This is a very important shloka. 22, 23, a very, very important shloka. 23rd is particularly my favorite shloka. Those of you who have heard mind management series from me, this is the shloka, foundational mind management series. Upadrashta anumantaja bharta bhoktama ishvara pramatmeti chapyukto dehasmin purushaha para. We shall take this discussion tomorrow. Thank you all for your kind attention and joining us every morning once again. Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki. I guess I would share this point. What is that? Prabhupada ka jo high class point tha in a BA Yogi group. Or else we can share in our Google group. Not Google group, sorry, what group? Our Evolve community. We'll share the Evolve community. I guess there's a group already for BA Yogi members. So we'll share that, and there we'll start the discussion maybe from today. We'll share this highlighted portions of Prabhupada purport for further deliberation. Thank you. Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Hare